Welcome in. It is Sports by the Book here at the South Point studio. I'm Jeff Parles. She's Alex White. And Alex, today in our NFL previews, we keep it rolling. We go down to Charlotte and the Carolina Panthers in the NFC South. And boy, this could have been a very different looking team going into this year if it wasn't for the big time improvement from Bryce Young post his benching early in the year a year ago.
You are right, Jeff. I mean, the first year, not great what we saw from Bryce Young, and start of the year last year, 2024, it was a little rough. And then, of course, he was benched, came back better. You can really say from week 8 on, did play very good for the Panthers. Now the question is, which version of Bryce Young are we going to get? And was that the ceiling for him, or can we see even more out of him this year?
So we'll look at all the numbers here in Carolina, and we'll go through the Young stuff as well as we look at the schedule here. Carolina's at a win total of 6.5, and it's juiced to the over at minus 150. So expectation at Carolina is going to be 7-10 or better based off of those numbers. And look, it is not the most difficult of schedules. Of course, when you play in the NFC South, you get 6 games against your own division. Again, we'll have Tampa and Atlanta previews later on, but New Orleans is a team that you and I do not think very well of at all. They play the NFC West, which, again, of the other NFC divisions, that is the best draw, arguably. You can argue between them and the NFC East. And then they get the AFC East, which, again, other than Buffalo, pretty good draw, all things considered, schedule-wise for Carolina here in 2025.
It seems that way, right? But really going through the schedule and going game by game, I don't have the Panthers favored in very many of these games. So I do think it is tougher than what it's perceived to be. I don't think the West is going to be as down as they were last year, the NFC West, that is. And I mean, we already talked about a few of the AFC East. And I mean, there's some upside there for the Patriots. A lot of people have them as their kind of sleeper team. We talked about the Jets being way undervalued going into this year after some disappointing years with Aaron Rodgers there. So I really am not as high. I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid here for Carolina. And you talked about us not loving New Orleans, but I mean, I think they could easily be right there with Carolina. I don't have very high expectations of them making a huge leap forward. And I think these two will be 3 and 4, and it'll be very close in this division.
Well, just going on Young, and it's hard to say that it solely comes down to just the quarterback, but it pretty much does at this rate because the roster, again, I didn't think the roster was any good. I thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the NFL last year, and they weren't good. They were 5-12, but it looked like they might be, well, they might go 1-16, 2-15 for a while there. They won one of the Dalton starts, but 4 of their 5 wins came with Bryce Young at the helm. Now, the thing that is alarming is kind of been the case in Young's early career. Carolina either wins at the end of games or they win in overtime.
Right.
With Young, they only have 3 regulation wins, and only one of those 3 regulation wins the last 2 years with Young as the starting quarterback didn't come on a last-second field goal. 2 of those did. The other one did not against New Orleans. Their other 3 wins came in overtime this past year. Now, the good sign with those 2 last overtime wins, 36 points and 44 points. And Young was spectacular, especially in that game in Atlanta week 18, which was technically the game the Falcons did need. They would have needed some help, but still Atlanta needed the game. But Young's numbers just totally different from what, again, looking like an all-time bust, Jamarcus Russell level until he came back. And look, Young's numbers weren't spectacular by any stretch, but from week 8 through the 5th appearance through the 14th appearance for Young last year, which was week 8 and on, look, Carolina went 4-6. Young completed 62% of his passes. He was about 6.6 yards an attempt, which before that he was under 4.5. So it's a big improvement from there. And he didn't turn the ball over as much. He only turned the ball over 8 times in those 10 games. So the improvement is stark. It's just a matter of, is there another step forward again for Young? And I'm not so certain there is. I think Bryce Young can be about a league average starting quarterback, maybe slightly above average, but I just don't see much more than that. When you're that small, it's very difficult in order to leap into the upper echelon of the league, and I don't think Young will get there, Alex.
I'll continue on with this with the offensive side, and then I definitely want to get to the defensive side of the ball. But looking at their numbers in 2024, finished 23rd in points per game at 20.1. You mentioned the 2 last games, though, where which were a very good sign. 29th in yards per game at 298, 30th in yards per attempt, as you mentioned, 6.2 there, and 10th in yards per rush. So really good actually on the ground. Chuba Hubbard had a very good season for them if they can expand on that. And now they do add a piece with McMillan that they get 8 overall from Arizona. Looks like a pretty high ceiling for him as a wide receiver and a good weapon for Bryce Young. But that's just the offensive side of the ball, which I do think is better than the other side.
Just one last thing on the offense. Again, now you're back-to-back years with first-round wide receivers picked as well. Leggett the year before and McMillan this year. Top 10 capital, 8th overall for Tet out of Arizona. You still have Adam Thielen there. Running back room, as you mentioned, they were good on the ground a year ago. They actually improved the running back room because Rico Dowdle's there as well. They drafted Trevor Etienne as well. So they have good running back depth on that in that backfield, and again, an offensive line that you would expect to improve yet again after getting better as the year went along. But Alex, that defense you mentioned, what are you thinking here going into 2025?
So this is really tough because they really need to improve this defense, where they finished almost dead last in every metric. So 32nd in opponent yards per game, 32nd in opponent points per game, and dead last in opponent rushing yards per game. So could not stop the run. Third year here for the DC and Ajaro Yavero, and I definitely think he is on the hot seat. So a lot of pressure coming in with that side of the ball. Talking about their schedule, just looking ahead, I mean, I do think they face some good offenses and just don't have them favored in too many of these games. Definitely not 6. It's a strong lean to the under here for me.
You know, I'm going to just probably, more likely than not, this is a team that is very hard to find any sort of real angle other than the one at the bottom of your right, bottom of the right side of the screen. If you think Carolina is going to go over that win total, and you think Carolina is going to have a shot to cash in on 4-1 to win the NFC South, Dave Canales is going to be in the Coach of the Year running if Carolina wins the NFC South and may win the darn thing when it's all said and done, especially with, again, Carolina 2 years ago was the worst team in the NFL. Last year, until they really, again, Young turned it on, they were, again, even with the turn on, they were still one of the 3 or 4 worst teams in the league when it was all said and done, even though it wasn't there record-wise. Just look at the numbers. But Canales is live to win Coach of the Year if Carolina wins the NFC South. Now, I don't have much confidence in that happening. I think Tampa is well ahead of them. I think Atlanta is well ahead of them still. They're more likely than not. You know, it's very rare I feel like a division is pretty clear going into the year. The way that the win totals are, I think, is pretty clear of what this division more likely than not is going to be. Tampa's going to win the division yet again. Atlanta's probably going to finish second just because they have a ton of talent, but they're Atlanta, and you know some sort of idiocy will befell them at some point. And Carolina, to me, is just significantly stronger than New Orleans is entering the year. So I think Carolina, it's hard-pressed for me to find an angle where Carolina makes the playoffs or finishes higher than third in the NFC South, unless if there's injuries at quarterback for Tampa Bay or Atlanta. Even Atlanta wouldn't be totally hosed if Penix got hurt because Cousins is still there. You have to imagine Cousins would, if he gets pressed in the service at all this year, has to be better than he was a year ago because it was real bad down there for Cousins. But in the end, Alex, it's hard pressed, and I'm with you. It would be a lean to the under, not strong. 6-11 and 7-10 feel like the most logical records for me, which makes it a very tough bet on anything here for Carolina. I think they're just going to be one of those forgotten teams when it's all said and done. They go about their business. They go 6-11 or 7-10, and we look up and it's like, oh, okay, they were not terrible, but they weren't close to being a competitive team just yet.
That plus 130 is very tempting for under 6.5. I mean, I am really struggling to find 5 wins there, and that gives you a nice, game and a half where it's the NFL. Anything can happen. I have Tampa Bay 12 points better than Carolina, and that is starting from my grandfather to my dad, then to my power ratings here with just some adjustments. And I do believe in their player power ratings going into this. And the other thing is we talked about a lot of their skill positions, and they've made a lot of moves there, but their defense is weak, and I still don't really trust this team in the trenches, and that is where it all starts in the NFL. So it's going to be tough. I do think Dave Canales is a good team. I just don't think he's got it yet, all the pieces there. So we will see. But you're right. I mean, it's a weak division, so a lot could happen. I just am not betting, and I'm very high on Tampa Bay, so I'm not betting on Carolina to win this division just yet.
And again, you look at the schedule, it's not like the path to 7 wins is there. The path, it's going to, you have to win games early. You have 2 road games that are obtainable. They beat Arizona last year, and Jacksonville. We'll get to the Jaguar preview a little bit later on. I don't think either of us are particularly high on Jacksonville. There's just a lot of unknown with what Liam Cohen is a head coach. And again, I'm not a huge Trevor Lawrence guy, as you know. But look, there's a path up until week 8. Again, super late bye week of week 14, but first 7 games, there's a path. Carolina could start 4-3. It's not insane. You get Atlanta at home, you get Miami at home, you get Dallas at home. If those games are on the road, you probably look and say, oh, they're probably going to lose those. But those games in Charlotte, they're winnable. At New England's even winnable. All those games, those first 7 weeks, there's a path to win all 7 of them. They're not going 7-0, obviously, but Carolina went 3-4. All right. Or if they pop a 4-3, okay, you only need 3 more wins down the stretch. Now, their schedule, other than the 2 New Orleans games, starting in week 8, gets considerably more difficult. They get the 2 New Orleans games, sure, but they have to play Buffalo. They have to go to Green Bay. They have to go to San Francisco. They have to play Tampa twice in the last 3 weeks. It gets significantly more difficult for Carolina after those first 7 weeks where, it's possible they could spike a 4-3 and be 4-3 going into that Buffalo game. And there's a lot of conversation of, wow, Bryce Young's really improved. The Panthers are this surprisingly good team, and then they lose 5 out of 6, and it's like, oh, that was really for naught.
No, I mean, Jeff, I think you see in the future. I think that is pretty dead on there. I do think you're right. They got to get some wins early on in those first 7 weeks. And then, people might even be talking about them having a chance to take that division, and then it gets brutal from there. So just tread lightly, right? And maybe even don't jump in yet on the win total if you're not as confident as me, and wait until they do and see how they do 3 or 4 or 4 or 3. And then you might get a much better number for the rest of the year and go under that.
Be another team also. We've talked about, Alex, the alternate win totals once the season begins, the in-season win totals. This might be one to attack, especially if Carolina gets off to a high-end start, which, again, could they start 1-6? Of course they could. There are a lot of, all 7 of those games, like, they'll be an underdog in probably 6 of those 7 games, but they are going to be tighter lines in at least some of these early season games for Carolina. They're not going to be north of a touch. They shouldn't be north of a touchdown in any of those games, those first 7 weeks. Maybe Arizona, depending on what people think of the Cardinals, especially if the Cardinals go to New Orleans and put it on the Saints in week 1. But again, it's obtainable for Carolina, a good start. And then you can come under like 8.5, 9.5. I think that would be a fantastic way to play this.
I cannot argue with that at all. I mean, the real argument to say that the start of their schedule is tougher is a lot more experience under center besides the Falcons, where we will see Michael Penix Jr. for the start of the season there, and then of course Drake May with the Patriots. But other than that, I mean, you are getting pretty much veteran quarterbacks there with Trevor Lawrence and Kyler Murray, and then even Dak Prescott coming off of injury. So those are going to be a little bit tougher for Bryce Young, and you can even see his numbers there on our graphic with Bryce Young, 80-1 to be the MVP, and some good plus prices there. Yeah, good plus prices there under if you like any of his other props there.
Yeah, the Young over 3,500 passing yards is interesting at 2-1. That'd be the only way to look at. Again, unless if Carolina is like the big shocker, like Young's not going to be in the MVP conversation in 2025. All right, so we got Panthers. And we're going to keep it rolling. We got plenty more previews to come. And we're just stay tuned to this channel. Make sure you're subscribed if you're watching us for the first time. Sports by the Book. We're live Monday through Friday here at the South Point, 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's 1 o'clock Eastern if you're watching us on the East Coast. The best in sports betting every single day, and the best in the NFL previews right here on Sports by the Book. She's Alex White. I'm Jeff Parles. We'll see you again next time right here, Sports by the Book, South Point Studio. This has been yet another NFL season preview.